Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. Well, this week we're going to do another segue with two songs with very different moods to them. The first is very optimistic to the point of being, well, let's call it what it is, kind of cheesy, but still a cool song. And the second is very sort of gritty, down-to-earth, pessimistic with a little bit of schadenfreude mixed in. For those of you who speak German or are familiar with that particular word, we really need to come up with a word in English that is equivalent. It basically means reveling in somebody else's downfall. But anyway, the two songs are that staple of 80s cheese pop, Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're rolling your eyes already, but keep watching. I promise this is worth it. And the second is a song called Used to Rule the World that is originally written and I believe first recorded by Randall Bramlett, but has recently been made a popular single by none other than Bonnie Raitt, blues guitarist, songwriter, singer extraordinaire. So, the two songs both have a root key of C sharp. Never Gonna Give You Up is C sharp major, and Used to Rule the World is a very gritty C sharp minor. Gritty in particular because of the use of this natural sixth, which you normally don't have in the minor scale. So instead of that, it's a C sharp minor Dorian, a C sharp Dorian scale basically, because you got that natural sixth. And in particular, this awesome voicing, you got the root, the seven, the minor third, and the natural sixth. One of the grittiest sort of blues rock voicings or combination of notes that you'll find. So, but as I said, these songs have the same root key. Now, that's going to be the crucial point of this because it's the only point of commonality we have. The tempos are different, as I said, the moods are different, and for all intents and purposes, the key is different, but the root is the same, and that's what we're going to use. Now, if you weren't around in the 80s and somehow managed to dodge the phenomenon known as Rickrolling that was popular in the late 2000s and spilled over into this decade, in which basically you send someone a link to, you tell them it's a news article, something, whatever, in an email, and somehow it takes them to a video, the music video of Never Gonna Give You Up. And this, as if people weren't already fed up with this song enough. I gotta be honest, that's how I first heard of it. That said, it's actually a pretty cool song, and there are ways to play it, to make it your own and whatnot, that can make it really enjoyable to play and indeed to listen to. So, in spite of the fact that it's basically become a punchline thanks to internet culture, it's actually a fun song, and I still very occasionally throw it into set lists. Mainly in use of this segue or another one similar to this that I'm going to talk about briefly toward the end of this video. But just in case you somehow managed to dodge both its wave of popularity in the 80s and its resurgence, this is what it sounds like. I can't do the now infamous drum into Actually, it's a Rick Astley song, so it requires a Rick Astley voice. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. And if I ask me how I'm feeling, gotta make you understand. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you, never gonna make you cry, never gonna say goodbye, never gonna tell a lie or hurt you. Like I said, really kind of cheesy, but still a fun song. Particularly, I have my own little variation. Rather than just F sharp, G sharp, G sharp, A sharp minor, I actually throw in a relative minor F minor chord there, which I think gives it a little more motion. It's a little less stagnant. So that's a fun little variation you can try on your own if you want to play this song. Anyway, that is Never Gonna Give You Up, as if you didn't already know. And for those of you who are familiar with that song, I apologize because it's now going to be in your head until the end of time. But maybe we can shift it with the second song, which, as I said, is probably best known for Bonnie Raitt's recent version of it. The first track on the Slipstream album, which is her most recent record at the time of this recording. An incredible album. You got to check it out. And it goes something like this. As I said, it's a song... It's a song about has-beens, people who used to be very popular and were on top of the world and seem to have all the answers, and where they are now is, basically all their life has fallen apart. And this song, in some ways, it seems like just sort of a pessimistic list, but there seems to be a touch of smug satisfaction about it, as you'll hear when the end of the verse. It's basically a verse refrain when the refrain comes around. It goes something like this. Dr. Feelgood, sleeping on a concrete bench. Can I get a witness? Miss South Carolina, 1975. Somebody stole your crown. You were sleeping in your happy home. When you woke up this morning, your life had come and gone, and now you're mystified. You're standing with the rest of us who used to rule the world. And the second verse kicks in right after that. So as you can hear, it's very sort of punchy rock, touch of the blues to it. And it's a character song. There's all these people, Miss South Carolina, Miss Hurricane, Brother Lovejoy is mentioned in the next verse. So, all these sort of pious leaders of the community, self-important people who are suddenly facing the reality that they're not on top of the world anymore. So, very different message between the two songs, which is kind of what makes this segue all the more spectacular. It's kind of like... I think the first one of these segues I did was I'm Not Saying a Word from the musical Blood Brothers into Double Vision by Foreigner. It's basically they have nothing in common. The entire point is to completely sucker punch the audience and to completely flip the mood at a moment's notice. So, as I said, the root note of C sharp is going to be the most important part of this segue. Because Never Gonna Give You Up, it originally fades out, but it's pretty easy to end it. After the last chorus, I like to just keep improvising over the chorus progression because in the original it fades out, just repeating that progression. So that'd be something like this. Never gonna tell a lie or hurt you. Oh, na 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 na, yeah. Just ends on a C sharp major, and that's basically how you'd end the song live. I'm not sure how he ended the song live. I'm going to assume it's something like that. But the first very dramatic hit of Used to Rule the World is this awesome voicing that I was talking about with the C sharp and the bass. So it's really simple what you do, and this is another kind of segue we've talked about before, is basically make the last note of the first song, replace it with the first note of the second song. So, it's going to be a very abrupt change. The tempo is going to change, the mood, the key, everything. But it's basically all centered around this note. So rather than go, it's very jarring. Here's how it would sound in context. Sleeping on a concrete bench. Can I get a witness? All in one split second, you got the audience thinking, whoa, what's going on here? You know, you can imagine if this were this sort of my visual artistic side, what little of it there is. You can imagine that if you know, a band was doing this particular segue, the color of all the lights on stage would suddenly darken all in that one moment and everything. Maybe I'm just rambling incoherently. I tend to do that, as if you've been watching this podcast for this long, you probably already know. But as I said, that's the whole point of this, is when it's not going to be smooth, embrace the weirdness. Make it work for you and for the songs. So this is how you would do that. Now, I mentioned this segue has been in my set list for a while. It's not entirely true. I only recently started going into Used to Rule the World here. What I often did, and this will appeal to a small portion of my audience who is familiar with this song, The Brew, my mentor's band, back when they were still around and I would play with them all the time, had a song called Faces, and they had a long live introduction to that started like this. Also in C sharp, it's not actually a minor, it's Mixolydian, so sort of dominant major. And that was how I originally came up with this segue. Because the Brew used to do this, any song that ended on a C sharp, you know, they'd have, be it major or minor, they did this all the time. You know, they'd let the C sharp hold, and then Chris on his keyboard would just start. So that's how I came up with the idea. And I learned Never Gonna Give You Up, of course, because of the whole Rickrolling craze, and it was very popular in my high school, and I learned to play it for the high school events that I play music for. And so one day I decided to do that ending on C sharp thing, and I just came up with this. And it's slightly less jarring because, as I said, you still have the major third here as opposed to the minor third. But the effect is still there, changes the mood, changes the tempo, the key color, everything. So, that was what I originally came up with. And for any of you who happen to know how to play Faces, you know, there's a bonus one for you. If you don't, just, it's the 5th. Why are they, 5th of July, why are they still setting fireworks off? Anyway, I don't even know if you could hear that, but we'll see once I post this. But that's how this segue works, and it's another great example of the sucker punch segue that, as you know, I'm very fond of, though as I've told you in the past, you don't want to use it too often. It's kind you want to be very sparing with, because otherwise it loses sort of the mystique of it. But that said, here's one for you. Have fun with it. Hope you enjoyed watching. I will see you next week.